Hey everyone, this is Jonah with Gray Area. Today I'm joined by Marc Spence. Hailing from Birmingham, Marc is a tech house DJ, teacher, and label head for the iconic Box of Cats. Check out our full interview below and like and subscribe for more like this.
But I just have to ask because I see you're in the studio right now, and I mean, it looks really awesome. I can see all the equipment behind you, and I'm sure in front of you. Has have you found? Because I know a lot of people I've talked to. Obviously, there's been major downsides to this period, but I think a lot of people have kind of discovered some creativity again. What's that been like for you? Just kind of having more studio time.
Well, I'll be completely honest. When I first found out about the lockdown, because I'm not really much of a media person that's like to do with social media or the normal media. I kind of live in my own little bubble. So when this was all coming up about the lockdown and the virus and so on, I heard like passing comments, but I never really focused on it until the one day I went into where my record shop is, and the guy who like owns the site, he looked like he'd saw a ghost, and I was like, well, "Are you all right, like Jack?" And he was like, "Nah, this virus." And I was like, "Whoa, is this actually a real thing?" But then when I heard about it, I went home and spoke to my housemate, and she was like, "Yeah, we got a lockdown." I was like, "Hang on a minute, let me get this right. I can chill in my studio 24/7 and nobody can bother me. This is like a dream come true." And I can imagine many other artists around the world said the same thing. But lo and behold, it didn't work out that way because the record shop, we ended up adapting to more of an online service. Through the tuition that I do, we started doing online, which was really cool because I got to work with people like in Texas and Portugal, doing it all over Zoom. So I ended up doing more work during lockdown than I did without. So that was the hope. But I think one thing that so I didn't really get as much time, but the time I did spend was well used, like the signings to Dirty Bird and a couple releases coming up with Box of Cats and so on. But for me, the whole time was pretty much normal. I guess I kind of find inspiration anywhere, really.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And it's interesting, I think, especially, well, for anybody, but even just observing artists, like this period, it's kind of been like, what are you going to make of it? Like, all right, normal life has been distorted. So what are you going to do? I know, like, personally, I was able to get involved in this interview project. And as a for my full-time job, as I mentioned, I'm a talent buyer, event promoter in New York, but that wasn't happening. So, how are you going to pivot and how are you going to, stay on top? And I think it was interesting just observing kind of the electronic scene, who wanted to really put the effort in and be out there all the time, and who was like, I'm going to take this time to kind of step back and focus on the music. I just want to pivot quickly and just kind of get into it. You're from Birmingham, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, just I don't know if I've actually spoken to anyone from Birmingham. I'll have to look at my notes, but I've talked to a lot of you guys, who are kind of coming out of the UK. And I know for me and for people kind of our North American audience listening, it's really interesting because I think a lot of us just look at the UK and it's like, oh, it's London and it's Manchester. But the reality is, like, there's lots of huge cities and different scenes. What was it like, for you coming up in Birmingham, and how did you discover electronic music?
Well, electronic music for me, well, to be honest, I was lucky to be in a record shop because when I started off in this whole industry, because the truth is I wanted to be a footballer or soccer player, as you'd probably say. But then I had an injury on my leg. I literally just bumped into a friend who was giving out flyers, like flyers for clubs, like hand to hand. And then I kind of got a job there. Well, I did get a job there. And then we used to store all our flyers in a record shop in the city. So the truth of it is like I was a lot more into like kind of urban music and that, really, because the job that I had was for the local council. And I was very lucky. The guy I used to work with, it was all cassette tapes then. He introduced me to like real in depth with the garage scene and the drum and bass. And this one group in particular, Heartless Crew, and their DJ Fonte used to mix up everything, like little bits of reggae with drum and bass and hip hop with drum and bass and garage, and really get creative. And then I was more into like hip hop, and around that times we're talking about 2000, 2001. Well, around about that era. So it's like Missy Elliott, Justin Timberlake, Timberland, NERD and Neptunes and stuff were doing their thing. But I used to just go to hip hop clubs and just get down with that, and I was happy. And like house as a whole, like because I didn't really know the depths of it, because I only kind of knew like the broader tracks which are on the radio, and like Head Candy and Funky House was really big at the time. Now I could appreciate it, but I wasn't really into it because I got into DJing through the record shop. So I used to play drum and bass and bits of garage and stuff. But it wasn't until I heard the music of Switch, who's also known Dave Taylor.
Yeah.
And that just changed my whole perspective of house music instantly. I walked in, I was like, what is this music? He's like, oh, this is house. I was like, I ain't ever heard house music like this before. Show me more, show me more. And literally just could convert me overnight, which then I got more into like what was like more the electro house scene at the time. But again, my personal favorite was more that solid groove, which is like the old school solid groove, dub-sided, Sinden, Hervey, and that little crew of people, which really opened my mind to house music. And then my house music journey began.
That's awesome. Do you have a memory of like the first time that you ever played a gig, whether, you know, kind of as under your current project, or just like really the first time you were behind the decks in front of people?
Oh, massively, because I learned to mix in a record shop. I mean, I couldn't afford the equipment at home. So CDJs were, I like to say, on their industry takeover. So you were still walking into clubs and you still had turntables, but the CDJs were on top of the turntables, which is a massive disrespect in my eyes, but it is what it is. So what it was for me, because the only way I could ever really practice was with turntables, and then my girlfriend at the time lent me the money to buy some, and because everybody was getting rid of them, I got like an amazing set of 1210 Mark IIs, which are still over there today, like 16 years later, for like £400 for the lot, when these days, you know, obviously there's doubled in price. But what I did myself, because I was kind of promoting and flying, I already kind of like knew everyone sort of thing in the scene that I was in, which, like, you know, was a massive benefit. And I basically bought an hour and a half, 2 hours worth of music and prepared a set. And I practiced this set over and over and over again till I was hearing it in my sleep. And I actually lost a girlfriend for it at the time, because she was that fed up of hearing the same set over and over. But, you know, repetition is the key to mastering anything, really. And once I was happy with the set, I then went to the promoter, because obviously I already knew them. And I was like, yo, you're going to give me a set at your at Mud Club, it was called. And he was like, do you DJ? I was like, yeah, man. It was like, oh, get me a mix. But the truth was, I didn't have the money for the equipment or studio time, because it wasn't as easy as whacking a USB in those days. And I was like, come on, man, I'm a promoter. I'm not going to go up there and make myself look an idiot, am I? Is that all right? You can play next week. So I turned up the week after, and this was like an after party, this was. So I was playing the graveyard, which was like 5:30 in the morning till 7. And I went up there, and it just like, what I had to do was unplug the CDJs after the DJ before me, plug in the turntables, make sure they were earthed, checking wicked, and then get my first track in. And luckily it went almost as planned. But yeah, now I remember it distinctively, to be honest, because I had my hat on, because I didn't want anybody, because everybody knew me as a promoter. I didn't anybody to think, you know, because it's a little bit of a cliche sort of thing like then, to be like, oh, there's another promoter. I just wanted people to, you know, hear my music, and just, that was it, not see any kind of face to it. But yeah, I still remember it like it was yesterday, to be fair.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I think it's fun. I'm of the opinion that like every promoter wishes they were a DJ. I know I definitely DJ for fun, just as a hobby, and like anytime an opportunity comes up to play in front of people, I'm just like, oh man, this is the best. But you know,
Totally.
and I mean, what you mentioned, God, it's so different back then, where now, you know, you just bring your USB and it feels so standard, even though the CDJs now are so expensive, you know, the access to them is pretty easy. You know, you can find a studio and just get in there for a couple hours and learn. I just wanted to ask, because you mentioned it, the UK garage sound, you know, it's something that I think a lot of people, DJs who came up in the UK, talk about. But I don't know, you know, how much of a footprint it has in the US. Could you just kind of tell us a little bit about what that sound is like and why you think it's so popular over there?
I think the era it was made is probably quite important, if not massively important, because if I'm looking to more like 96ish to 2001, 2002, and I think what was available at the time, so it was a lot of hardware, and I kind of feel that the people who were making it, I mean, to get to use hardware and to produce at that, during that era, you really had to show a lot of dedication and commitment. You know, just like the evolution of anything really, the software these days, like your Abletons and your Logic, and even the accessibility of the information due to like YouTube and so on. And even, like I said myself, I do like a tuition school where someone can come and pay and sit one-to-one and we show them how to use the program. But during that era, you really had to show a big commitment to the music and even to, well, your craft. And it was so musical, you know, I mean, at that time, you had to be good, you know what I mean, to kind of break through, where now there's so much, like there's so much people doing stuff. It's probably even harder to stand out then, but I guess the software and so on really does do a lot for you. When that day, like the music had to be really on point, and because people were spending so much time committed to their art, and it's like, you know, it's a commitment of your life really. I say that in a bad way, but I mean, like, it's a lifestyle. So the dedication really shone through in the music, because you didn't have so much of the technology to help you through it if the actual, like, if the music itself and the production through the hardware that you was using weren't good enough. So I'd like to say that really, I just think that the music itself was so good, it's lasted for so long.
Yeah,
And even the
absolutely. No,
vocalists, the vote, there was so much more heart. And but I say that, I mean, I think it's probably unfair to say there was so much more heart in it, but really, if you didn't show the commitment or the dedication, you'd just give up and you'd move on. So the people who put that extra amount of time in, you know, the music was really, well, it shows in the music, to be fair.
yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, absolutely. And what you said, I mean, just the accessibility now, you know, to be able to just go online and watch hours and hours of tutorials and have somebody teach you that you've never met. But speaking of, you know, as you mentioned, you have this school that you run. I just saw some videos, you know, on your Instagram where it's like you're teaching kids how to DJ, and I'm sure that there's a lot more to it. But could you just kind of tell us about that project and why you wanted to start that?
I actually work for the company.
Okay.
It's quite funny because DJ Gym, it's called, and we've got studios in Birmingham, Manchester, and Oxford. But the umbrella company is called London Sound Academy, and they've been running for over 10 years now. And Buster, he's like the CEO, the founder, and it literally just come at a good time, because I think a horrible position to be in life or as an artist is relying on your art to pay your way. And when you are in that and you're like, oh, you know, you're really wanting something to happen or really pushing for something to happen, and you're kind of relying on your next gig again to pay your rent and pay your bills, it's like I said, it's not a great place to be in mentally. And I think the art suffers then from that, because consciously you're kind of putting that pressure. And then my housemate at the time, and I was actually living with Chris Lorenzo. I mean, some of your viewers might know Chris Lorenzo, like he's
Yeah.
from Birmingham. And my other friend, Amit, and he was looking for a job, and he kind of called me and he was like, yo, this job would probably suit you, because I I guess it's probably, I'm probably known for, I mean, where I can, if anybody ever asks for help, I'm always one to offer it and be there as much as I can. And the job kind of popped up. I went for the job interview, but it was quite funny because Buster, he basically says to my pal, he goes, your friend has never written a CV before, has he? Because apart from DJing and music and production, I ain't got no qualifications for anything, you know. But then, yeah, that kind of popped up. And what we do is we offer tuition. I like to say, when people always ask me, they're like, oh, can you teach me how to DJ? Or can you teach me how to produce? And my little like answer to that is, I can't teach you to do anything. You know, I'll show you how this stuff works and you'll teach yourself. It's an art form, you know, so it's always good for people to do that, you know, just spend the time and you craft your own art. But we work with all ages. I'm literally working with an 8-year-old at the minute, right up to like, I'm sure it's like a 65-year-old couple who were surprisingly banging out hard techno, but loving it, you know. But I mean, I have to say they're really, in comparison to what I said earlier about like, with like technology and so on, if it wasn't for the technology, I don't really believe we'd be able to have a company as successful as it is. Because referring to like the Pioneer equipment, you know, when you've got like a link, the CDJs, you know, you can see counters and so on, really, which, you know, people, it's made it very visual, to put it in a nutshell. And not everybody's interested in really doing it as a career or putting the commitment. They just want to have fun. So how I approach it with students in our beginner sessions, it is very visual, and I will encourage them to use the counters as aids, as I like to say. But then the more and more they get into it, the more difficult I'll make it for them by covering the screens. And then our advanced course, you know, after the intermediate, goes into more vinyl and stuff, and that really, so it's great, you know, because we're working with all different people, all different age groups, from all different backgrounds. And you know, like, I think most people, well, if you're dancing to music or you're playing music, you're never really in a bad mood, are you? So as long as they're happy and they're spreading the happiness, I guess that's a great gift that you can give, really.
Yeah, absolutely. The screens, I mean, I had the opportunity to use the new CDJs recently, the 3000s, and it's kind of amazing. I mean, this thing is like 4 inches tall, and it's like it's like an HD monitor, and it's touch screen, and like, I mean, even just compared to the 2000s, it feels like night and day, and it's so accessible. And you'll appreciate this. I was visiting a friend recently who somehow got his hands on CDJ 400s, and like, they don't even have a link with the USB. So like, you need 2 USBs to play, and there's no hot cues. It's like just a little looping, and like maybe there's 2 effects buttons. It was just kind of funny to see. But you just mentioned, I just have to ask, you know, you were living with Chris Lorenzo. How did you guys just meet because you're from the same place and you were both DJs, or what was the story behind that?
Well, what was funny at the time, now, at the time, there was like, Loz was doing a lot of, say, ghostwriting, engineering, and I was doing bits, but not really anywhere near as much. I find it really difficult, to be honest. I mean, if somebody comes in the studio and they're like jamming on stuff, I find that easier. But with somebody sitting there waiting for me to pull a rabbit out of a hat, I don't know, it just doesn't work. I just work off vibe and stuff. But basically, my friend, well, he was actually, he used to be in like the speed garage for sort of baseline sound, and I was in the house side of the industry. And then there was a crossover period about 8-9 years ago, and my friend, Dr. Love, he actually, cool name, but he basically come up to me and he's like, yo, you need to meet my friend Chris, man, you guys, because at the time we was both heavily into our production, and most cases, anybody who was making music from Birmingham within our sound, it was either me or Chris who had made it. So my friend was like, you guys need to meet, you need to work together. And then we met each other, and then it was just an instant connection, really, you know, because I guess anybody who's into music production in depth, you meet somebody else, boom, you're gone for hours. Like, you know, you've got that instant connection. I guess just like with many other things really in life, we shared that that interest. And then we got in the studio, and we just literally made music for the love of it. And we didn't really do anything with it. You know, we just loved to make music and, you know, spend time together making music and enjoying it. But then it got like probably about 6 years into it. I was like, bro, we've got probably enough music here for an album. Like, you know, and it's like, and we did actually put an album together, but we didn't really do anything with it. Because again, it wasn't really ever about that. It was just making music for the love of it. And then we ended up living together, and then he moved forward with his with America, started doing a lot more over there, so it made sense for him to move over. And then we used a track actually which we made a few years ago off his recent album Late Checkout. It's the last one, City Traffic. Well, that was something that we made years ago, but then we kind of brought it a little bit more up to date. And yeah, he put it out on that, really. So
That's awesome. Yeah, his sound has been really cool. Just kind of like you can see some of those influences, and he really like hits a lot of different notes. You know, I have to ask, obviously, Box of Cats, you know, the label that you work on, are founder of, I believe, you, Wongo, Jeff Dublow, Jack Z, Kyle Watson, Tommy Q. How did you guys meet? You know, what led to the decision to start a label? What was the origin story here?
well, to be honest, I was a little bit of a latecomer to it. To be fair, they'd already had it all set up, and I was talking to Wongo, and he kind of invited me. He says, "Yo, we've got this going on." Obviously, mentioned all the artists and people like Jeff W and Tommy Q and stuff, and even like Wongo and Carl Watson. Well, all of them. I remember like that. This was music I used to play like back in like the electro house days. And that really, but again, they had like more of a unique sound. So the electro house, I think when you're looking at a lot of people, because I mean, obviously it's just time because it was probably like nearly 10 years ago, there was a side of electro house which was more grooving, like kind of, yeah, I think I'd like to say more grooving, not so high mid frequencies sort of range, and it was more about the group. And again, I think we all share a love for Switch basically, and the dub-sided crew. And yeah, Wongo kind of invited me in, and he was like, you know, we've got this project going on, would you like to be a part of it? And again, once he mentioned the people involved, it was a no-brainer. I was like, mate, I'd absolutely love to. And you know, as you probably saw yourself over the past few years, it's just grown and grown, and you know, there's loads more people involved now from all corners of the globe, and it's doing a really great thing, I'd like to say, to be fair.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome, and I'll ask more questions about it later. But it definitely feels like, you know, one of these spots where rising artists seem to always land, and then we look at them 2 years later and we're like, oh wow, like they were releasing on Box of Cats. I just want to ask about Nasty, which, you know, I think is one of your bigger tracks. And I mean, your output over the years has been pretty tremendous, you know, tons of output, lots of big hits. But that was one that seems like it really stood out. And I always just like to ask this, you know, when you have a track like that that's had so much success, do you remember kind of being in the studio making it? Did you have a feeling of like this one might be a little bigger, and just kind of, you know, what the feeling was around when you made it?
I 100% remember that process, because it was probably one of the longest I spent time on. But for me, I'm personally like, my whole ethos in the studio is just capture the vibe. Just capture the vibe of that moment. I say to people, if they come in here, you know, if we're going for a jam, then look, don't expect to walk out of here with a track. Let's just go in, enjoy ourselves, and capture the moment, and just let it be what it's going to be. Because sometimes, you know, it's never really meant to be more than a jam. But that track in particular, I was actually living with Chris, And, you know, I think one thing that I really admire about Chris is his work ethic, which is one thing that I've really had to try and work on myself more recently. Because, you know, it's about finishing tracks and getting them out there. And again, that's one thing which I've really had to work on personally myself. But that track in particular, I remember I kind of created the whole vibe really within the machine. Like the drums, the bass. The bass was more of like it was a drum and bass sample. And then it was more the positioning of me moving where the sample taken, which kind of give it that more sort of grittiness to the sound. And I remember snapping it together. And then at the time, I wasn't ever really thinking about mix down or stuff or like the end product. I'm just literally trying to capture that vibe. But then when it come to the mix, because the arrangement, the whole track, that come together in about a day and a half. But then the mix, because I hadn't really thought about it when I was choosing my sounds, there was quite a clash with the bass and the kick drum. And it took me months. Like literally what I had to do was like work on the track for like a day and a half, 2 days, leave it, come back to it a week later or so, or even a couple of weeks later, because I believed in the track. What I like to go off, and probably many others, is if you open that project up again a couple of days later and you get the same vibe that you got when you were making it, then it's something to worth like putting the time into. But it took me months to get it to a point where I was happy. And I even remember Chris walking up the stairs and he turning around and he says, "Yo, it's about time you just give up on that tune, you know." And I was like, "Give up?" He goes, "Yeah, man." He goes, "For me, if I haven't finished a track by like 2-3 days max, I just move on, you know, and just start working on another track," which is one thing which I do appreciate what he says, and I do agree with when it comes to the case of getting music out there. You know, you can't keep working on one track for 6 months and solely, you know, because you're never going to get anything out. But it kind of drove me because, again, I believed in the track and I was like, give up. I might as well just hang everything up then and give up then, like, you know. But again, it really drove me with the track, and it finally got to a place where I had to go, okay, right, that's good enough. You know, it'll never be perfect from the artist's perspective, because you'll never hear music the same way the artist does or the same way, you know, like your audience will. But it got to a point and I was like, right, cool. Sent it off to a couple of people, and Descent Bristol come back and they were like, "Yo, you got a B track for us." And the funny thing about it was, what was it called again? Stop Interrupting. That track, one day, boom, done. Like, you know, completely done and that gone. And then so that was the process with that, really. And I learned so much from it, the process, because one thing that I really believe in is, okay, if something's not worth it, let it go. But if you do believe it's worth it, then put the time in. Because when you encounter problems, beat the problem, stick with it till you beat the problem. Only then you move on, because only then you'll learn. You know, if you just, a little saying I say to my students, if you walk around every hurdle you come to, you never learn to jump over it. Do you know what I mean? But so that was a bit of a long process, but one I'm definitely glad I stuck with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, that's obviously a huge one. I'm just curious, you know, I don't know if that's like a Roland 303 behind you or some other synth, but I was just curious, like, do you have any kind of favorite pieces of hardware or just like Ableton plugins that you find yourself using a lot?
Well, my baby, I don't know if you can see it, is the Akai MPC 2000 XL.
Yeah.
Maybe, and then that's then going into an Allen and Heath mixer, which then goes through Akai's MFC 42, which any any geeks out there like myself who love the hardware, they know that is a sick filter. It's like an Akai.
Is that an analog thing going on?
Yeah, that is there. And then it's going through the Alessi's 3630 compressor, which just gives it that pump. But now I do, and do you know what? I actually got the other day, because me and my friend are working on a project. I've got quite a few different aliases and so on that I work under, but one's called Ill Gotten Gain. And we've been working on an album now for probably the best side of 10 years, not consistently. We were living together and we was working on ideas, and then stuff happens in life where, just things kind of go off path, and then we've kind of come back, took stuff from we'd worked on ages ago and newer stuff, but actually the whole concept of the album is actually Birmingham in the 90s. And so the sound, we really want it to be as authentic as we can. So we have used a lot of hardware within it, but now I've got into the mix process. I've bought this little, well, I say little, but this DBX graphic equalizer. And this is the first time I've been in the studio for ages, like, believe it or not, because one thing I'm really guilty of is trying to do too much at once. So I've got the record shop, I've got the tuition center, and then my own production. But because I'm always trying to do it all, nothing ever gets done. So for the past few weeks, I'm just like, right, record shop, get that done. Let's get that back open. Let's get the cogs moving, all greased up, and then get somebody else to maintain it where I can then get back in the studio. So this is my first time for ages, and we're just kind of working on that project now to get that album done, polished off before I do anything else. But this little bad boy here, it's been a great addition. The first time I've used it today, and just these little, being able to get your hand on it, just, oh man, it's a game changer after that anyway. But yeah, quite excited about that, really. The little things in life.
That's awesome. It's funny you just said that, because I was actually, like, my next question was going to ask about ill-gotten gain, and then I also think you were doing this project called Jack and Rabbit, and so I was going to ask if you had any music in the works with those, but you just took it right out of my mouth. So we'll look forward to that. I just want to bring it back to Box of Cats. Kind of, as I said before, and as you guys have been on the forefront of kind of identifying up and coming artists before they break out. I mean, in the last couple of years, you've had music from like Omnom and West End, Lucati, Jay Wura, Vanessa, the Sponges, all these people who are now really like having their moment. I'm just wondering, kind of for you and maybe the whole team, what is it that you're looking for when you're listening to demos, and how do you think kind of you have grown as an A&R person over the years since you joined?
Well, I think when it comes to, because obviously we have the litter box and that as well, where we kind of put other tracks through, which are good tracks. I think when it comes to anything, I don't think we ever really have any kind of specific sound, and that really, it's just got to bang. It's just got to bang, and you just got to have a little groove to it. And we have like a Facebook closed group where we post all the submissions and so on in. And I think as long as it gets kind of the majority vote, and that really, then yeah, it's cool. But then we'll obviously decide on whether it be a single release or if it would go into the litter box. Now, litter box is a little bit more of a broad scape of sounds where it's probably not a certain track which we would have at the forefront, say, on a release, but something that we really enjoy, we really feel it, and we believe it deserves to be heard, and that really. But again, like, I think all of us, we're all heavily influenced from like 10 years ago, that real, again, I repeat, like the dub-sided sound, which was just, there is no limits. There's no limitations on the sound. We're not strict to, again, a certain type of sound, and that really. And if we're like, if we like the Sponges, for instance, they come with like that real kind of funk sort of elements and so on, which was like kind of new to us at the time, and that wasn't nothing was really doing on Box of Cats, but it just banged. It was like, these guys are making like beats, man, and I guess as long as it makes us vibe, and that really, I think that's what we're more about, is just, friendly. So I would say friendly, but fun beats, to be honest.
Yeah,
nothing too serious.
Those guys are awesome. I actually had the opportunity to interview them a couple months ago, and they were obviously, you know, super grateful for Box of Cats for kind of giving them that breakthrough. I'm just wondering, you know, now that you've been with the label for a bunch of years, is there anything that, you know, you've kind of learned about working more on the industry side, and has it changed your perspective when, you know, you're sending music out to other places? Do you have more of an understanding now of just kind of the whole process?
Um, well, I've got to be honest. Wongo does most of the work when it comes to that. Like, you know, you've got to give the guy credit, man. He's such a hard worker. And that I think the only thing I have really learned is when it comes to approaching labels, you know, introduce yourself. You know, you don't have to write a full speech, because I think when anybody opens a huge email or a message, like, oh, I'll get back to that in a minute, you know, but, you know, just be more yourself, introduce yourself, be polite, and, you know, just treat people as you wish to be treated, you know, because I think there's nothing more off-putting myself personally than when somebody just, boom, sends you a link sort of thing. You know, it's kind of like, come on, put a little bit more effort into that. Hopefully you've put more effort into your music than that. But yeah, I think, and try not to ask for too much, you know, like when because it is a form of networking, isn't it, really, you know, getting out there and speaking to people. But, you know, network by offering, by giving stuff, which is your music, and, you know, be a little bit more presentive of that, you know, like, hi, I'm such and such, like, you know, you don't really have to, like big people up too much, like butt lick in a sense, like, do you know what I mean? But, like, you know, just be polite, you know what I mean? Hey, we're all in the same industry, hopefully we're all doing it for the same reasons and so on, so there's already that connection. And, you know, just again, just be polite. So bit of a couple sentences about you, you know, and, you know, and your music.
Absolutely. How do you balance now, you know, as you mentioned, like you just put out with Dirty Bird, how do you balance for yourself kind of bringing music to Box of Cats versus, you know, sending your music out elsewhere? Or for you, is it just, you know, when you make a track, you have an idea in your mind of where it's going to go?
Well, I personally have the opposite. I try not to think about labels at all, because I kind of feel that then stuns my creativity. And that's one thing that I say when I say to people for going in to the studio, I say, yes, let's go and capture the moment. Let's have a vibe. And whatever you do, do not mention a label, because I kind of feel that puts a little bit of a ceiling then, because you kind of think, oh, I really like that sound. Oh, but would they like that sound? I think when it comes to sending music out, I guess I just kind of listen to the overall sound itself and try and picture it somewhere, and go, oh, you know, I think that would be worth there. But I mean, Box of Cats really would be, like, straight away in, like, my top 3 places to send it, because obviously, like, I know the guys are going to give me the time of day listening to it. They'll give me honest feedback, and I want to see the label do as well as possible. So, but recently, say up until, I haven't really been making much music, to be fair. Like I say, back to over like the lockdown, I was expecting to have loads of music to send out, and that really wasn't the case. I think after like the Muda Cooper EP, it had that quirkiness, which I thought, oh, you know, I'll send that over to Claude, and that really, and to Dirty Bird. And actually, it was with that. It wasn't the Muda Cooper. The other one, They Wanna. Is it called They Wanna? I'm gonna. It's all right, because, like, I've got this other EP coming out on Box of Cats on 1st of November, and it's either called They Wanna or I'm Gonna. But because they kind of, the flow sounds the same, it's hard for me to distinguish which one's which. But either way, I sent the B track to Dirty Bird first. It was like, yeah, love that. Have you got a B track? And then I sent to Muda Cooper, and it's like, yo, this is it. We'll use this as the A track, sort of thing, and that as the B track. So that kind of, yeah, that's how that kind of come about. But yeah, I just like to listen to the overall sound and then kind of decide where it could possibly go.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's really important advice because people can put themselves in a box when, it's like I'm trying to go on this label and then you're like trying to fit a sound in the studio and it just doesn't work. But just as I'm wrapping up, the last question I really have for you here is, as somebody who works on the label side and has been around for a while and you have a lot of experience, is there anyone kind of on the come up that you want to give a shout out to that you think's really been making awesome music, or more than one person?
There's a lot of people in my city. There's the Lepaski. See, they're all different sounds as well. Lepaski is a little bit more minimal. Bunny from Cold Water Cuts. Tom Jr., he's doing some real good stuff at the minute, really, really working hard and persistent. I feel real bad now already because I know as soon as this interview ends, I'm gonna be like, such and such. But when I'm kind of put on the spot on that, my memory's bad enough anyway. Jordan Masters, Fleur Shaw, Jake Whitehouse, let's say. Sorry, man. Sorry to anybody who that I should have said, and I didn't, because it's just my memory's so bad. But I am subconsciously thinking of you and want you to do well.
Hey man, I think you just routed off like 6 or 7 names. It's probably better than I would do if I was asked that question. But anyways, listen, that's all I got. This was really awesome. I just want to say thank you for taking the time today. It was great to learn more about your career. Been a big fan for a while, and I don't know if you have any plans to come to the US anytime soon, but we are eagerly awaiting you if you end up making your way over.
Well, just sorting out the visa situation. But if plans go well, I should be out in February.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep our ears to the ground and we'll look out for you then. And thanks again, man. Have a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Cheers.
Yeah, man. See you later, bro.